I met Zoe when we were 7. We were both wearing the same glittery pink sneakers on the first day of second grade, and somehow, that was all it took to make us inseparable. From elementary school all the way to junior year of high school, she was my person. My diary knew about her before it knew about my crushes, my fears, even my family drama. We had matching necklaces, those cliche best friends forever ones, but it wasn't just jewelry. It was real to us. Zoe wasn't just popular, she glowed. Teachers adored her, guys tripped over themselves around her, and other girls wanted to be her. Me? I was the quieter one. The girl who sat next to her, laughed at her jokes, helped her with homework, and always had tissues when she cried about another boy not texting back. But Zoe never made me feel like I was in her shadow. She pulled me into her light. When people asked us if we were sisters, we'd just look at each other and laugh. We weren't, obviously. Zoe had wavy blonde hair and eyes like a movie star. I had curly brown hair, thick glasses, and acne that made me want to sink into the ground. But the way we acted? Yeah, I could see why people thought we were related. We had a language of inside jokes, eye rolls, and code words that only made sense to us. We swore nothing would ever change that. I trusted her with everything. My first kiss? I told her before I even told the guy I kissed that I liked it. When my parents started fighting more and more and my mom would cry herself to sleep, it was Zoe who held me and whispered that it wasn't my fault. She was the first person to ever see me ugly cry. And she never judged me for it. Our world was small but perfect, our corner of the cafeteria, our FaceTime calls that lasted until we fell asleep, our secret Pinterest boards for the apartment we'd share in college one day. And then, everything cracked. It all started on a Monday. Funny how the worst things always seem to happen on the most ordinary days. I walked into school and could feel something was off. People weren't looking at me the same. A few whispering girls actually stopped talking when I passed them, and one guy, a senior who barely knew I existed, snickered. Didn't think she had it in her. I had no idea what was happening until lunch. Zoe wasn't at our table. That alone was weird. But when I texted her, she left me on read. That's when Taylor, this girl from our Spanish class, sat down across from me with this smug little smirk. So, she said, flicking her hair, how does it feel to ruin someone's life? I blinked. What are you talking about? She raised an eyebrow like I was playing dumb. You really going to pretend you didn't submit that anonymous post to the confessions page? The one about Coach Reynolds? Confessions page? Coach Reynolds? I had no clue what she was talking about. So I pulled out my phone and opened the school's anonymous Instagram page where people submitted gossip, drama, secrets, most of it fake, all of it juicy. And there it was. A new post from the night before, already blowing up in the comments. Coach Art isn't who he seems. Ask him about what he said to girls after practice. Some people might call it grooming. Just saying. I felt sick. Coach Reynolds wasn't exactly my favorite teacher, but I never said anything like that. I never submitted that post. And suddenly, I realized. People thought I had. They believed I had. It was awful. Everyone assumed it had to be me because I was quiet, observant, and yeah, I'd been in the gym sometimes after school helping Zoe with her cheer routines. People twisted that into motive. Like I'd seen something I didn't like and went full whistleblower. By sixth period, the principal had called me into his office. Brooklyn, he said, in that fake calm voice adults use when they're already convinced you're guilty, we need to talk about an accusation that was anonymously submitted. I told him the truth. I didn't post it. I didn't know anything. I hadn't even seen it until lunch. But the thing about lies, once they take hold, the truth starts to look suspicious. That night, I texted Zoe in full-on panic. She still hadn't replied to anything all day, and I needed her. I needed my best friend. Me. Zoe, please. You know I didn't do this. Please say you know I'd never. She replied 5 minutes later. Zoe. I don't know what to think anymore. That single sentence shattered me. This was the girl who once said we were soul sisters, who told me she'd trust me even if the whole world turned against me. And now? Now, she was just one more person who thought I could do something that cruel. The next day was worse. A few girls from the cheer team posted vague stories on Instagram with captions like "snakes always get caught," and "some people just love attention." I knew they were about me. By Wednesday, I stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria. By Thursday, I couldn't sleep. I started dreading going to school. Every hallway felt like a war zone, every classroom a courtroom. And the worst part? Zoe didn't even look at me anymore. She walked past me like we were strangers, like we'd never shared late night talks or planned our futures together, like I was nobody. That's when I realized I was completely alone. And whatever this was, it wasn't just gossip. Someone had set me up. But why? Why would anyone do this to me? And why? Was Zoe letting it happen? I barely recognized myself anymore. It had only been a week since the anonymous post went live, but it felt like I'd aged years. I walked through school like a ghost. People looked through me, not at me. Or worse, they stared like I was something disgusting stuck to the bottom of their shoes. No one said it out loud, but the message was clear. They thought I was a liar, a coward, a girl who ruined a man's life for attention. Coach Reynolds had been placed on temporary leave pending investigation, but the rumor mill had already convicted me. It didn't matter that I didn't write that post. It didn't matter that I had no proof I didn't. What mattered was how easy it was for people to believe I could. And what broke me most? Zoe. She hadn't said a single word to me since her cold text. I don't know what to think anymore. She didn't come to my locker. She didn't send a single snap. She didn't even defend me when Taylor and the rest of the cheer girls whispered loudly enough for me to hear about some people not knowing when to shut up. It felt like a knife twist every time her voice echoed in a hallway and wasn't meant for me. I kept asking myself, how could she believe this? After everything we'd been through, how could she just vanish? And then I started wondering something even darker. What if she knew the truth and was hiding it? I hated myself for thinking that, but the thought wouldn't leave me alone. That Friday, I finally cracked. I left lunch early and ducked into the library. It was the only place in school that felt safe, like the rumors couldn't reach me between the shelves. I slid into a corner table and just let the tears fall. I didn't even realize someone had followed me until I heard a soft voice. "Hey, you okay?" I looked up and saw James. We weren't close, but we'd had 2 classes together since sophomore year. He was quiet, a bit nerdy, but kind. Always kind. I wiped my face quickly and tried to fake a smile. "Yeah, just allergies." He gave me a look. The kind that says, "Please don't insult my intelligence." After a beat, he sat down across from me and said, "I don't think you did it." My heart stopped. "What?" James leaned in. "The post. About Coach Reynolds. I don't think it was you." I stared at him, the words hitting me like oxygen after being underwater for too long. "Why?" I asked, voice cracking. "Why would you say that when no one else believes me?" He shrugged. "Because I've actually paid attention. You never even liked that stupid confessions page. And when people were laughing about it in math class, you looked like you were going to throw up." I covered my face with my hands, overwhelmed. "Thank you," I whispered. "You have no idea how much that means right now." He hesitated, then said something that changed everything. "I also don't think it was anonymous." My hands dropped. "What do you mean?" James pulled out his phone and opened the Instagram page. I've been looking at the submission times and comparing them to the post timestamps. The owner of this page isn't as slick as they think. They posted the coach thing at 9:47 p.m. Sunday night. Then, exactly 4 minutes later, they responded to a DM about it. Someone asked, "Is this for real?" And the page replied, "Believe what you want." I blinked. So, James said, "It means they were online." Active. And I have a guess who runs the account. He tapped a few times and showed me another screen. It was a list of public Venmo payments. He searched for a name. Taylor Morgan. Taylor sent $5 to someone with a note. For the juice. Right at 9:30 p.m. that same night. I stared. My heart pounding. You think Taylor runs the account? James nodded. Or at least helps run it. She's been getting real bold about it lately. And think about it. Who benefits the most from you being dragged right now? My stomach twisted. Zoe, I whispered. James didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The pieces started clicking into place like a sick puzzle. Taylor had always been jealous of Zoe and me. She was the third wheel, the one who always smiled just a little too tightly when Zoe chose to hang with me instead of her. And lately, yeah, things had been weird. Zoe had started posting more selfies with Taylor, hanging out with her more, even skipping our weekend movie nights for cheer business. I hadn't thought much of it. I figured they were bonding more because of cheer, and I didn't want to be the insecure friend. But what if this wasn't just drifting apart? What if it was something else? That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts spun like a carousel stuck on fast forward. I pulled out my old scrapbook, the one Zoe and I made in middle school. Each page was full of Polaroids, doodles, inside jokes, and promises. So many promises. One page had a quote we wrote together after my mom's hospital stay. Even if the whole world turns against you, I never will. Z plus B forever. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Then I picked up my phone and did something I hadn't done in days. I texted Zoe. Me. I need to talk to you. Face to face. Tomorrow. Please. It's important. She didn't reply that night. But the next morning, she was waiting by my locker. When I saw her, my breath caught. She looked nervous. Eyes puffy like she hadn't slept either. She held the strap of her backpack like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I got your message, she said softly. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Can we talk? Somewhere private? She nodded. Yeah. Okay. We went behind the auditorium, where no one usually hangs out during first period. It was quiet. Too quiet. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said it. Why didn't you defend me, Zoe? She looked at the ground. I didn't know what to believe. Seriously? After everything we've been through? She looked up then, and her voice cracked. It's not that simple, Brooklyn. You don't understand. Then help me understand, I said, barely holding back tears. Because right now, I feel like I lost my best friend and got blamed for something I didn't do all in the same week. Zoe hugged herself. I was scared. Of what? I asked. And then, finally, she said something I'll never forget. Because the post was true. The world tilted. What? Zoe's lips trembled. Coach Reynolds. He said things to me. Things that weren't okay. After practices. In his office. He touched my arm once when I tried to leave and said I owed him for getting me on varsity. I was speechless. I didn't tell anyone, she whispered. Not even you. I felt gross. I thought I was overreacting. Then Taylor said we could post it anonymously. That it'd force the school to look into it. I felt my knees go weak. You posted it? Zoe nodded. But then it blew up, and people started guessing it was you. And I let them. Because if they thought it was you, it couldn't come back to me. I panicked. I couldn't breathe. She let me take the fall. To protect herself. And the thing was, I understood. But it didn't make it hurt any less. Tears ran down her face now. I'm so sorry, Brooklyn. I didn't mean for this to happen to you. I couldn't handle being the victim. I didn't want anyone to look at me the way they look at you now. Silence hung between us. A silence heavy with everything we'd never said. I turned away. And for the first time since second grade, I didn't feel like her best friend anymore. I felt like her sacrifice, I don't remember walking back to class after that conversation. It was like I was outside my body, watching everything happen through thick glass. Zoe's confession played over and over in my head, her voice cracking, eyes full of regret, saying, I let them think it was you. I had begged the world to believe I was innocent. I had screened it with my silence, with my tears, with every awkward hallway shuffle and every meal skipped in the cafeteria. But none of it mattered, because the one person who knew the truth had let me drown. And now she was sorry. Sorry. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. It didn't fix anything. It didn't give me back the days I spent crying into my pillow, or the late nights when I stared at the ceiling wondering who I even was anymore. It didn't take away the looks I still got in the hallway, or how I started checking over my shoulder every time I walked to the bathroom, half expecting someone to shove me or whisper something cruel. Zoe apologized, but I was still broken. I barely slept that weekend. My mom noticed the dark circles under my eyes and asked if I was sick. I told her I was just tired. I didn't tell her that my heart felt like someone had ripped it out and stomped on it, then handed it back and told me to keep functioning like everything was fine. I kept checking my phone, half expecting Zoe to text me again. She didn't. And that said everything. I wasn't sure what I wanted more, another apology, or for her to just disappear. By Monday, the whispers had started to quiet down a little. Not because people knew the truth, but because they'd moved on to something else. Another drama. Another scandal. But I hadn't moved on. I couldn't. James met me at my locker before first period. You okay? He asked, like he always did. I shook my head. Not really. He nodded, like he understood I wasn't just talking about school. You were right, I said softly. About the post. About Taylor. About Zoe. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. Want to talk about it? We skipped first period and sat in the bleachers behind the gym, the autumn air sharp in our lungs. I told him everything, Zoe's confession, her fear, her silence, her apology. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. When I finished, I looked at him and asked the question that haunted me most. Am I a terrible person for not forgiving her? He shook his head. No. You're a human being, and you're allowed to hurt. I looked down at my hands. She was my best friend. She knew me. And when everything fell apart, she didn't just walk away. She let it happen. James was quiet for a while. Then he said, there's a difference between someone who makes a mistake and someone who chooses to let someone else bleed for it. That hit hard. Because that's exactly what Zoe had done. She bled too, yes. What happened with Coach Reynolds was real and awful. But instead of confiding in me, instead of trusting me the way I had always trusted her, she used me like a shield. She gave me her silence instead of her truth. And now she wanted my forgiveness. But what did forgiveness even look like in a world where trust had been shattered into a million sharp little pieces? Later that afternoon, I was called into the counselor's office. Brooklyn, Mrs. Ellis said gently. I wanted to check in. There's been a lot of attention on you lately. I nodded. I'm fine. She gave me a look that said, no, you're not. Then she leaned forward and said, I wanted you to know that the investigation into Coach Reynolds has officially moved forward. Other students came forward with similar concerns. Because of that, he's no longer employed here. I blinked. Wait, other students? She nodded. Yes. Some students shared stories that lined up with the anonymous post. It's clear now that there was a pattern of inappropriate behavior. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. He was gone. Gone. The weight I'd been carrying on my chest, the fear that I was being punished for something that wasn't even true, lifted just slightly. But then came the second wave. Zoe hadn't been the only one. Other girls had been hurt, manipulated, silenced. And suddenly, I didn't know what to feel. Anger, grief, relief, guilt, all of it. After school, I sat in the park across from campus and just stared at the trees. It was strange. The world kept spinning. People walked their dogs, leaves drifted from the trees, cars passed by with music blasting. And here I was, trying to process the fact that my entire reality had been flipped upside down. That's when Zoe showed up. I didn't even hear her footsteps. One moment I was alone, and the next, she was there, standing a few feet away, looking at me like she wasn't sure if she should come closer. "I heard about Coach Reynolds," she said softly. I nodded. "Yeah, me too." I wanted to say, "I'm glad the truth came out." I didn't respond. She took a tentative step forward. "Brooklyn, I." "Stop," I said quietly. She froze. "I know you want to say sorry again," I continued, my voice steady now. "But the thing is, I don't need another apology." Her eyes shimmered. "Then what do you need?" I looked at her, really looked at her. She looked different, smaller, sadder, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel safe around her. "I need space," I said. "I need to heal. And I can't do that if you keep showing up, expecting me to pretend like everything can go back to the way it was." Zoe bit her lip, trying not to cry. "I understand. I'm not saying I hate you," I added quickly. "I'm not even saying I'll never forgive you. But right now, I need to figure out who I am without you." She nodded, her voice breaking. "I miss you so much." I did too. God, I did. But that wasn't the point anymore. "Goodbye, Zoe," I whispered. And this time, I walked away. It's strange how silence can feel so loud. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up to a text from Zoe or checking our shared Spotify playlist or laughing at one of our thousands of inside jokes. My mornings were quiet now. My evenings were quiet too. But somewhere in the stillness, I started hearing a new voice, my own. It wasn't confident yet. It didn't roar or shine. But it was there. For so long, I had been Zoe's best friend. That was my label, my role. People even called us one name, Seabrook. We were a duo, a package deal. Now, suddenly, I was just Brooklyn, and I didn't even know who that was. I started going to the library more, not just to escape, but to explore. I found myself drawn to memoirs, stories of survival, of people who had been silenced and then learned how to speak again. One book in particular stuck with me. A girl who had been wrongly blamed in high school, just like me. She had written her truth and shared it with the world, even when no one believed her. And eventually, they listened. It made something shift inside me. I wasn't ready to talk to everyone. Not yet. But I needed to let go of the shame that wasn't mine to carry. I needed people to know the truth, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to stop feeling invisible. So I started writing. Not on Instagram. Not in the group chat. Just in a blank Google Doc titled, My Side. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. But it was mine. I wrote about the day the post came out. The fear. The confusion. The betrayal. I wrote about Zoe, about how much I loved her, and how much it broke me to realize she didn't protect me. I wrote about the guilt I carried even though I hadn't done anything wrong. And I wrote about Coach Reynolds, the damage he caused, the girls he hurt, the silence he created. And then, I sat with it. For days. I didn't know if I'd ever share it. But just writing it made me feel like I had taken something back. Like I wasn't just the girl they whispered about in the halls anymore. I was a person again. James kept checking in, like clockwork. He never pushed, never pried, just asked if I wanted to talk, if I wanted to walk home together, if I'd seen the latest episode of that mystery show we both liked. His presence was quiet but strong, like an anchor I didn't realize I needed. One afternoon, we sat on the bleachers again, watching the sky fade into a cotton candy pink. I told him about the story I wrote. He listened the same way he always did. "You thinking of sharing it?" he asked gently. I shrugged. "I don't know. What if it makes everything worse? He paused. I think the worst already happened, Brooklyn. And you survived it. That stayed with me. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Taylor got exposed. Not publicly, not dramatically, but someone, maybe one of her own friends, maybe someone sick of her lies, leaked a screenshot of her Venmo note about the juice and tagged it under a comment thread about the confessions page. It didn't go viral or anything, but it made its way around our school community fast. Suddenly, people weren't so sure anymore. Whispers started again, but this time, not about me. They were about her. Someone even posted a meme, a snake wearing lip gloss and labeled Taylor's spirit animal. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the outcast. I felt seen, but I also didn't feel vindicated. Because even though people were starting to doubt Taylor, no one had ever really apologized to me. Not the cheergirls. Not the classmates who turned their backs. Not the teachers who looked at me with suspicion instead of concern. They just moved on. Like it never happened. Like I wasn't left to bleed alone. I realized then that I couldn't wait for closure from other people. I had to give it to myself. So, I made a choice. I finished editing my story, cleaned up the spelling, added a simple title, What Really Happened, a truth no one wanted to hear. Then I posted it. Not on some gossip site. On my own blog. I'd quietly created one over the weekend. Just a simple layout, no comments section, no photos, no drama. Just my words. I posted the link to my Instagram story with the caption, My side, if you care to know. And then I turned off my phone. I didn't check messages. I didn't read DMs. I didn't look for likes or shares or responses. Because the point wasn't what they thought. The point was that I had spoken. I told the truth. On my terms. The next day, something happened that caught me completely off guard. In the hallway, as I walked to history, one of the freshman girls I barely knew tapped me on the shoulder. I read your blog, she said quietly. It was brave. I blinked. Thanks. She smiled. You're not alone. What you went through, it mattered. A lot of us just didn't know how to say it. Then she walked away. For the first time in weeks, I felt something warm rise in my chest. Not pride. Not relief. But peace. Later that day, I got an email from one of the school administrators. They had read my post too. They said they were sorry. They said they wanted to schedule a meeting with me, to hear more, to understand what the school missed and how they could do better. It was the tiniest step in a long, long road, but it mattered. That night, Zoe texted me again. This time, it wasn't an apology. It was just one line. I read it. I'm proud of you. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. Maybe one day I would. Maybe not. Some wounds don't close just because someone finally sees them. Some wounds just become part of you. You learn to live around the scar. And maybe that's okay. 3 months passed. Winter came early that year, with icy sidewalks and breath clouds in the air. The trees outside the school turned into skeletons, bare and reaching, and everything felt a little quieter. Slower. But inside me, something was blooming again. Not in the way it used to. Not in the laughter-filled selfies or sleepovers with Zoe or the naive belief that best friends could never hurt you. That part of me had been burned away. But underneath the ashes, something stronger had started to grow. I was changing. The whispers had stopped completely. The people who once looked at me with suspicion now looked at me with something closer to guilt or awkwardness, at least. They didn't apologize. Most didn't even speak to me. But their silence didn't feel as loud anymore. It felt like space. And I was learning to fill it with something better. James and I became real friends. Not just hallway friends or shared class friends, but someone I could talk to when the nights got too heavy. Someone who sent me memes when I cried and let me rant without trying to fix everything. One Friday afternoon, we were walking home when he asked, Do you think you'll ever talk to her again? I didn't need to ask who he meant. I looked up at the gray sky and exhaled. I don't know. Maybe someday. But not now. He nodded like he understood. Because it wasn't just about what she did. It was about what it revealed. I had built so much of my identity around Zoe. Around being her other half. But in losing her, I was forced to discover who I was without that. Without the comfort. Without the constant shadow. And it turned out I was someone. I was more than someone. I started focusing on things I never gave myself time to explore before. I joined the school's creative writing club, something I'd always wanted to do, but had been too scared to try. I shared pieces of my story in bits, fictionalized, raw poetic. People listened. Some even cried. One day, a sophomore I didn't know came up to me after club and said, "Your story made me feel less invisible." And just like that, the pain felt worth something. Not justified. Not erased. But transformed. That was the real healing. Not pretending it didn't hurt, but turning the hurt into something that mattered. I got invited to speak at a small assembly, a student-led mental health event. They asked if I could talk about resilience. At first, I wanted to say no. What if I cried on stage? What if no one cared? But then I remembered how it felt to be silent. How it felt to walk through those hallways with everyone believing I was someone I wasn't. And I knew I had to say yes. The night before, I stayed up writing. I didn't want it to sound rehearsed. I wanted it to sound true. When I stepped onto the stage the next day, my hands trembled. The auditorium wasn't full, just a few classes, some teachers, and a couple of parents, but it felt like the whole world was watching. I took a deep breath. Then I spoke. I was falsely accused of something I didn't do. For weeks, I was the villain in a story I hadn't written. People turned their backs on me. Some people I loved the most stayed silent when I needed them loud. I thought I would break. But I didn't. I paused. No one moved. I learned that resilience isn't about not breaking. It's about what you build after. I built a voice. I built truth. And I built a new version of myself, one who isn't afraid to speak up, even when it hurts. When I finished, the room was still. And then, they clapped. Not the polite kind. The kind that made me want to cry for all the right reasons this time. After the assembly, I went to the bathroom to breathe. To collect myself. That's when I saw her. Zoe. She was standing by the sinks, looking down at her hands, like she wasn't sure if she should be there. When she saw me in the mirror, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe pride. Maybe regret. Maybe both. "I came to hear you speak," she said quietly. I nodded. "I saw. You were amazing. Thank you." Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Then she said, "I still think about what I did. Every day." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw a different kind of sadness on her face. Not guilt. Not fear. Responsibility. "I do too," I said. "But less than I used to." She swallowed. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not sure if I'm ready to give it yet." She nodded. "That's okay." We stood there for a moment, just existing in the same space again. Two girls who had once been inseparable, who had once promised to never let go. But some promises break. And sometimes, that's what makes you grow. "I hope you're okay," she said. "I hope you are too." Then we parted. No hugs. No dramatic tears. Just two lives, quietly moving on in different directions. And for once, it didn't feel tragic. It felt necessary. That night, I walked home alone. The wind was cold, but I didn't mind. I pulled my jacket tighter and looked up at the stars. I thought about who I used to be. The girl who clung to her best friend like a lifeline. The girl who didn't know how to be seen without someone standing next to her. And then I thought about who I was now. A girl who had survived being misunderstood. A girl who had found her voice. A girl who was building herself from the inside out, brick by painful brick. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning.